Next on stage, we've got another great Q&A visionary debate featuring Mr. Osman Sultan, who's the CEO of Do. Osman, if you would, please come up to the stage. And Mr. Ghassan Hasbani, who was just on the stage. Welcome to both of you. Thank you.
Well, as you know, Osman Sultan is CEO of Do Telecom. He was appointed in his position back in 2006 after 8 years as a CEO of Mobinil prior to that. He has a vast experience, including managing operators in Europe, North America, and the Middle East. He's the winner of many awards, a visionary person in the telecoms industry, a well-noted speaker, and recognized telecoms leader in our part of the world and globally. So again, please join me in welcoming Osman Sultan today with us, and it's a privilege and pleasure to be with you, Osman.
Thank you, Ghassan.
Following on from the previous discussion today, we will move into something related, but slightly different to keep the debate going into kind of deeper and deeper discussions. As we have discussed earlier, Osman, you know, the world is transforming, and it's transforming at a much faster pace than before. Our world has gone through multiple industrial revolutions. With the steam engine and the previous two industrial revolutions, we came to the third industrial revolution, which is the digital revolution in the telecoms and digital space. And obviously, we're all anticipating a fourth revolution in the manufacturing industry. It is happening now. But we'll come to that in the kind of second part of the discussion. Focusing on the third industrial revolution today, which is the digital revolution, where do you see the remaining challenges are? Is it over yet? Is it still in the making? Are we keeping up with that pace? And where do you see the gaps today? Convergence of technologies, industries, etc. And how do you see telecom operators moving forward in the internet everywhere for everything space within that revolution?
I fully agree with you that we are witnessing at the same time, while we are trying to catch up with the digital revolution, some qualify this as the third revolution, we are witnessing a shift towards, or this revolution as well, handing over to another kind of revolution, and we'll talk about this. To answer your question specifically, I think that the main challenge is to be able to extract ourselves from the kind of ecosystems we are used to. I'm always struck by the fact that simple ideas, not at all far from the telco space, or that should not be far from the DNA of telcos, have been allowing and have been at the source of creating companies that are now really mainstream and that are now the global internet player. If you consider companies like Facebook, if you consider companies like WhatsApp, where no particular technology innovation, it was just focusing on addressing in a very good experience a need of people. And by the way, this need is not very far than, you know, connecting people and how close this should be to our DNA. But it was done through a totally different ecosystem. And in the previous interview, my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Julfar, His Excellency mentioned that the experience, I mean, we've been focusing on doing things based on assets, building our networks, etc. And these companies, without any assets, just by offering something, he has been mentioning that some of these companies, even without revenues, or maybe you were mentioning without revenues, had a value that was much beyond where our companies and the shareholders of these companies had a totally different approach than the shareholders, because this is why it was difficult for us to change our mindset. This is why it was difficult for us to revolutionize the ecosystems in which we work. I'm still surprised, to say the least, not to say disappointed, on our inability to move faster and to catch up on the digital space. How many applications we could have done if we have, among us, operators, built scale. This is going to happen. This is going to happen, but in my opinion, it took us, and it's taking us, a lot of time. So that's a main challenge. These companies are global because today, when you use WhatsApp in any place in the world, it's exactly the same experience because you have a small team dedicated. I one day listened to the founder of WhatsApp, and he said, the way we judge ourselves, when it takes us 6 months to make something that one of our customers can do in 5 clicks, he can make it in 4 clicks, this is when we celebrate. And this is really, for me, being fanatic about customer experience. And this is not something that has been our forte, probably because our legacy and our history.
But in this situation, how do you convince an investor or shareholder to keep their money with a telecom operator in the next 5 years instead of investing it in an entity that turns around a much bigger return on investment in terms of valuation, with much little revenues, much smaller revenues, and a much smaller cost base? How do you convince them? Do you put the element of risk and stability of those businesses in the question, or do you go and say, no, the telecom industry will actually transform to create the same level of agility that exists in those companies?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that one of the key enablers of the success of the digital model is the venture capital model, the VC model that allowed to be able to drive all this, etc. Now, it is absolutely fascinating that the largest media company in the world doesn't own any content. The largest taxi company in the world doesn't own any cab. And these things. So we are really facing a radical transformation.
Yeah.
To your question, how do we convince? I think that today you see investors looking, and probably the same investors, you see them investing in a way in one of these companies, but investing in another way in a telco operator, because they are expecting something different. They will associate telco operators to a certain, to a certain type of investor, probably closer to when they invest in utilities, with expected return on investment, with expected as well guaranteed investment. While the other side is different kind of investment, different size of investment first, etc. I wish that our shareholders, I wish that the boards, and I'm sure that all my colleagues and telco operators, I wish that board members sometime will give us the flexibility not to look at the results of the next quarter or the next year, and will give us some risk possibility or risk taking in order for us to move in this digital space. Our move in the digital space is somehow preempted or channeled or leashed,
by the mindset
held
of the
unleashed
investor.
by the mindset of our boards and investment that want us, legitimately so. They have invested in telco companies with certain expectation, with certain, and they are spoiled.
But to push
the return that they have been having traditionally and historically.
No, exactly. Let's push that argument a bit further. Do you see in that case the same boards and the same shareholders having to deal with both large infrastructure investment decisions and the day-to-day operation of a small investment in a digital company or a partnership in a digital company? Or do you see special entities and special purpose vehicles being created with a different mindset without profit being at the top of the agenda.
Fully agree.
But value creation.
Very, very good question, and I agree with what your question was implying. I think it would be very dangerous to try to mix all these and to try to convince shareholders and board members to just look at the entire package. I think you need to distinguish this in special purpose vehicle, and then you can define, scope this, and educate or explain or convince your shareholders and board members that this has to be treated separately in terms of expectations, etc. It's an operating model, but it's part of what Mr. Julfar mentioned as a key priority, how we transform internally our organizations to take them into the digital space.
Moving on to what we mentioned earlier, the fourth industrial revolution. And just as a definition, this is basically the revolution that is taking place in the healthcare industry, robotics, 3D printing, for example, in the way manufacturing will happen. So just a small example, 3D printing will probably do to manufacturing what the PC did to the computer industry by proliferating production across the world. Major changes happening in that space, and it's also happening at the
to the music industry.
Oh, what I tuned into the music industry. Exactly.
To the music industry.
And going back to this point where telcos are sitting there providing that infrastructure, do you see them being pushed further by this fourth industrial revolution down the pipeline route, or do you see light at the end of the tunnel where this could be a savior and creating a great opportunity for telcos to play a key role in the fourth industrial revolution?
You know, Ghassan, it's strange. I mean, a few weeks ago, I attended a small talk with a dear friend, Mr. Joey Ito. He is heading the MIT Media Lab. And he used a title saying, "Bio is the new digital." And I just looked because I thought that, digital is the new thing. So somebody now is telling me, there is something, there is the new digital. So it made me start thinking. To the second part of the question, where do I think telco, honestly, it would be very pretentious to have an answer. I mean, but what is it all about is that now these digital capabilities, where, in my opinion, and I like to use the metaphor from vertical to horizontal, in the sense, and let me please explain it, because we used to think as verticals. In the telco industry, you had the mobile industry, and people in mobile used to do everything in the mobile. The infrastructure, the access, the services, the payments, billing and payment distribute, etc. And the fix, etc. And then conversions happen. Mobile, fix, the internet, we club them, but we still are tempted to do everything. The infrastructure, the access, the services, the distribution, the billing, all this. The media industry was organized around 4 poles: outdoors, radio, TV, print. Now you see the digital just bring everything together. But there's still, now more and more, in my opinion, you will see players focusing. I mean, it was mentioned in the first presentation. You have people now offering the infrastructure. You have people that are able to offer access, but all across. Take an Amazon, and in a very provocative way, in distribution and billing, Amazon is capable of doing all the job. I mean, with some nuances, of course, but they are capable to offer something that we offer, but at a global level. Take a Google, they are in terms of access, etc. So are we going one day to see players that will take possession of, certain layers, where we as telco, we need to think what kind of layer we really want to position in? I don't know. But that's the thinking that we were talking about into moving into the digital space. And that thinking hasn't yet matured.
Right.
We are in a space, and this, in the interview that Mr. Julfar had, it was very clearly shown we are moving from these unshared certainties that we had. In telcos, we had our certainties, we knew how, and these certainties because we had power of states, even when regulators went, and at the time, there was no regulators. And now we are moving from these unshared certainties to the necessity of sharing, but in my opinion, we are moving to shared uncertainties because revenue models are still not very clear, where we position ourselves is still not very clear. Moving to this fourth revolution that you are talking about, which is digital enabling now, back to the industrial revolution, back to the digital going into the factory. In MIT now, they're telling you about, you mentioned healthcare. They're doing research. We had one of their key person, and they're sending sensors into your body, and these sensors are detecting. Same technology that they use to determine water leakage in the city of New York. Robots that go into the pipe because, infrastructure is a little bit old in New York, and you have 25% loss in the water, just loss purely in the pipes. So they send these robots, and initially it was to detect. Now it's to detect and to fix. In the human body, it's to detect cancerous cell and to stick to it so you can send you something that is detectable on radiation. Tomorrow it will be providing the chemo. So it's a whole revolution. Where telcos will be, I think one area, because I consider that the smart cities are part of this handing over to digital moving to make something. And smart city, by the way, is an illustration of moving from vertical to horizontal. Because today, if you take, for instance, cities like the city of Dubai, where we are, or other cities, or the UAE generally, you have smart applications, but these are vertical. This is a government department providing a smart application to do things. When you enter Dubai, it's a smart way. When you deal with your road and transportation, it's a smart way. The smart city is having all these, and there will be a panel on smart city, so please, I don't want, far from me the idea to just, but in my opinion, it's how all these will talk together in a horizontal way. And how layers will happen.
I'll give you that.
Telcos in smart cities, and this is going to be, I believe that here we have more or less a clear idea of where we should be and what kind of partnership. But telcos in the industrial space in this fourth revolution, I think it will be too pretentious to pretend that we have a clear idea.
We have a clue. Okay. So from what you said, that is starting to sound like in the new fourth industrial revolution, telcos might play the role of logistics and bringing things together rather than the role of a manufacturer in a way. But certainly. It's yet to be seen. Is the telco operating model and business model ready to deal with that horizontal transformation? Because we'll probably be seeing less competition in certain areas, and more in other areas. So how do you see the operating model transform and the level of readiness? And before you answer that question, I want to ask the audience to start thinking of their questions so we don't spend too much time waiting, because I'm going to open it to the audience in a second after this answer.
Well, some people who heard me before know that, for instance, on the infrastructure part, and that's not different with my colleague, friend, and in this particular case, competitor, because it's important to highlight that there is common thinking on the infrastructure. I personally see, because it's becoming so vital for the digital development of nations, which is part of the economic development of nations, I personally believe, and I've been saying this for years, on the infrastructure part, I see less and less competition, more and more government. That will allow on the services part to see less and less government. In the places where government is on the entire vertical, less and less government and more competition. So that's, for instance, how this horizontal layer. To your question, are the telcos operating model ready for this transformation? I don't think it is yet mature for the move to this digital space. How about moving to this extra space? Certainly not. We need to think differently in ecosystems.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to do it. We have let, and good for them, they did great job. We have let all these global internet players, come and occupy the space. Fair, it's because they did things better than we did. I don't want to just say, oh, these guys, look at what they did. They did a great job. We did a great job as telcos because having all this infrastructure allowed all this to happen. And today, the world is really benefiting from great capabilities, great empowerment for citizens, great empowerment tomorrows for cities, for nations. I like to think of it with a very, very, ambitious, positive way. Telcos played a great role. Internet players are playing the great role. Thinking differently about ecosystem is something that in telcos we need to sit together and think. We have tendency to think more about the usual pattern. We think interoperability. Yes, but interoperability is not going to transform the business model that we are basing our business on.
Very good, thank you. And now we can open it to the audience. Any questions from the audience or thoughts?
Good morning. Noel Kakuli from Nokia Networks. Osman, we've known each other for many, many years. When you go back and look at the transformation that you achieved in the Egyptian mobile market and coming into the United Arab Emirates market with overall competition, do you not feel, and Linda mentioned what we achieved in WRC in Geneva last month. Let's bring us right up to date. The climate change agreement that was reached last night, do you not feel as a telecommunications industry we can and should play a leading role in achieving those goals when you look specifically in the Middle East where the challenges we face, not now but 6 months from now, with the challenges of heat management, electricity, utilities, etc., etc. So I think, again, putting intelligence back into us as an industry, and we as Nokia Networks see we have all the ingredients there, and how do you see us playing a key role in achieving those goals? Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, all of a sudden I feel a responsibility on my shoulders with this, but...
Climate change.
Yeah, but thank you, Noel. And indeed, we have been, and it has been always, the story is changing, and the pace of change have been really mentioned. I refer back again to the interview in the Egyptian market to just say, it was the story of mobility. It was as a start, believing that mobility will be such a great story, actually. This was what made the transformation. Coming here, I started, and you know better, in the Egyptian market, a mobile in the hand of everyone. Then I came to this market where the mobile was in the every hand of everyone and probably one in the pocket as well. So the story was totally not about mobility. The story had to be articulated about what we are talking right now about, which is what can you do with this mobility? Because this mobility was not about just being able to reach someone, but all the things that we are doing now. Because of this, now coming to your question, specifically because of this, there is a responsibility on telcos. Since we are at the base, this underlying base of infrastructure, together with our partners, and I see a lot of them here in the, infrastructure, and we shouldn't undermine the role that these partners have been doing in the development of the technology. Because if infrastructure today and if the internet space today is able to do the great things that we are doing, is because as well of all the R&D and what they did in terms of technology, is because the networks become faster, the networks can carry much bigger and bigger things. So that is as well something we have all a responsibility. As I said, we are now, should we admit it or not, at the heart of the economic transformation of nations. And that implies our responsibility in all these challenges that the world is facing.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, at this point in time, again, it's always a pleasure and privilege to be among your friends and colleagues again. Please join me in thanking Osman Sultan for his insights and thoughts for the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.